afternoon, friends. It is me, I'm Sparrow. I'm about to share my screen. And how fun that we had a tie between a jittery voice and a away voice. I might try to combine those two excellent skills. When we read Mrs. Witch, fortunately, that's not till almost the end. I am so ready. It's Wednesday, and I think I'm sharing my screen. If I am, that's great. And I haven't turned on my camera. I'm sorry. Do. Where's the button for sharing my webcam? There it is. All right, because I wanted to show you. I am now there. Welcome to my work office. Today I am broadcasting from beautiful Vermont in the town of Norwich, which is right across the Connecticut River from the Little Straw House where I've been broadcasting previously. I am delighted to welcome you to Vermont, to welcome you to the third day of time camp. I'm going to click the button so I'm not distracted by extra things that Sharon's going to take care of for me. We are Sharon Hoff, questioner and commenteer. When you type in the question box, Sharon's going to see what you have to say. It might be a question, it might be a comment, it might be an observation. Please share your thoughts there in the question box. She organizes them and then puts them on my screen where I can see them. Oh yes, I do need to click the present button on my slide program so we don't see the thumbnails. Hadn't gotten there yet. There we go. There we are. Oh, much better. Okay. Poof. I'm Sparrow Alden. As I said, I'm in Vermont today, and I'm reading with you. I'm thinking deeply with you, and I'm, for today, your discussionista. Tomorrow, Sharon, who is so amazing, is going to sub in for me while I go to a little training. And so you'll get to see Sharon tomorrow, and she will be your discussionista. Remember, if you want to communicate with us outside of the broadcast times, that's fine. Write to camp@signumu.org. Today we're talking about chapter 3, which is titled Mrs. Witch. First, I want to tell you the folks in the library group, Ms. Gregory's library group, built a haunted blanket fort. How fantastic. Okay, what I really need to know, on the bottom, the giant fluffy thing, is that like a real dog, or is it a pillow made out of fluff? It's black and white. It's like this blue merle giant great white Pyrenees with salt and pepper hair. I don't know. I think it's amazing. What they did to make it haunted was their own sound effects. They were squeaking and creaking and making, I hope there were howling noises because that's my favorite. And they had a great conversation about if there's a story that a place is haunted, what would they do to continue the reputation so people would kind of stay away from it? Ooh, that Falcor is a huge stuffed dog, and that's the big fluffy thing. They're using him as their Fortinbras. Okay, that's the best. I nominate you guys for best library kind of ever because you've got a giant stuffed dog to play the part of Fortinbras. Everyone here at Signum who has seen the pictures are really impressed by the beautiful quilts in some of them. See the blue star quilt, stars, science fiction. It looks beautifully handmade, and wow, we are just, please pass on the praises to whoever made that gorgeous thing. Here's their final photo with the both colors doing the log cabinish thing. We are really grateful to the Logan, Utah, the Logan, Utah time campers. Their intrepid guide and guardian is patron technology librarian extraordinaire, Natalie Gregory. And Ms. Gregory made sure that it's okay for us to share those photos of kids' faces, because that's a safety thing that everyone should watch out for with photos, is where are you putting them? and who knows that they're going there. Great. Thank you so much, Ms. Gregory, and all your marvelous time campers. All right, here we go. Our threads so far, I've added a couple things. We've been talking about science. We've been watching for a happy medium in behavior or feelings. Keep an eye on that. I also noticed yesterday we started to pick up on the idea of conforming. Remember when Mother, Mrs. Murray, was sorry that she let Meg see how upset she was. And Mr. Jenkins is saying, you know, if only you'll be average and boring, roughly, and conform to what I want you to do, tractable, which is the opposite of a mule. I want to keep an eye on that because there are really good reasons to conform to expectations. Like if we all conform to the law, more people are more safe. But there are also some negative sides to conforming. If you think of some negative sides to conforming, type them into Sharon. I'll read them out when we get to them. Think of other positives and negatives about conforming, and particularly when we're looking at the story, blast those in. Oh, that was encouraging someone to conform. Oh, if they don't conform, they'll have, I don't know. I don't know what you will see. That's the cool thing. We will all see different things. And I've added another one for today. We've seen a few instances already of a character knowing stuff without having learned it. Like Calvin said, I've got the feeling for the first time in my life, I'm going home. How did he know that? It's kind of I don't want to say the opposite. I'm going to say it's a supplement to the science way of knowing. Observe, infer, make a really great guess, poke at it a little bit, experiment, change it, see what happens. Calvin did not have his attention on details that he could touch and feel and measure. He just knew it, and maybe knew it. I'm touching like my gut and my heart. And so maybe that's a different way of knowing that is complementary to the science way of knowing. So hold that. When you see it, shout it out by typing. Type it out. We're not even setting type anymore, are we? Keyboard it out, all right? So we can talk about it and see that change and develop over the course of the book. All right. I have titled our slides today, Ways of Knowing, because that seems really important to me. In the forest, evening was already beginning to fall, and they walked in silence. Charles and Fortinbras gamboled on ahead. Calvin walked with Meg, his fingers barely touching her arm in a protective gesture. This has been the most impossible, the most confusing afternoon of my life, she thought. Yet I don't feel confused or upset anymore. I only feel happy. Why? Maybe, sorry, Calvin, maybe we weren't meant to meet before this, Calvin said. I mean, I knew who you were in school and everything, but I didn't know you. But I'm glad we've met now, Meg. We're going to be friends, you know. Interesting way he's using the word know. Can you guys start contributing if he knew who you were in school and everything, but I didn't know you? I have an idea of what he means. Can you guys say that with more words so I can get a bigger picture of what the difference between knew who you were and know you? Go for it. I'm going to wait. Uh-huh. Knowing you deeply, knowing you Knowing you instead of your reputation. Well said. So I knew who you were in school and everything. Sounds like he knew about her, the stories other people told. What kind of stories did other people tell about Meg at school? He's contrasting them. Obviously, seeing someone from the outside is really different from understanding them personally. Jenny M., that is exactly what I was thinking. That now he knows Meg the person compared to Meg the stories about her. Interesting stuff. Oh, people are also different in school or maybe in any big group situation than from how they really are inside. I like that. Jenny, two fabulous observations. I appreciate it. Okay, I'm glad we've met now. And then he uses the word no again. We're going to be friends, you know. Now, the phrase, you know, can be like tripped off the tongue, kind of a verbal gesture. But the fact that it came after those two types of knowing is really interesting. We're going to be friends. He didn't make observations, make an inference, make a hypothesis, and do an experiment on it. He just knew it, or assumed it, or thought it. We're going to keep examining this way of knowing. I don't know I call her when I don't come home, Calvin said, his voice bitter. She wouldn't notice. He sighed and dialed. Ma, he said, oh, Hinky, tell Ma I won't be home till late. Now don't forget, I don't want to be locked out again. He hung up, looked at Meg. Do you know how lucky you are? She smiled rather wryly. Not most of the time. Mother like that? A house like this? Gee, your mother's gorgeous. You should see my mother. She had all her upper teeth out, and Pop got her a plate, but she won't wear it, and that means a kind of dentures. And most days she doesn't even comb her hair. Not that it makes much difference when she does. He clenched his fists. But I love her. That's the funny part of it. I love them all, and they don't give a hoot about me. Maybe that's why I call when I'm not going to be home, because I care. Nobody else does. You don't know how lucky you are to be loved. I've got a great comment. Knowing someone means you get to know their personality, their likes, and their backstories. And here's a piece of Calvin's backstory. He's not just basketball guy. He's someone who loves his family. Remember yesterday we were wondering why he was like not with his family, what was going on there, and someone suggested maybe he just doesn't like them. He's telling his own story that he loves them but doesn't feel that love returned. With the conforming issue, this is a comment from Jenny M. So many people present a facade in public in order to conform and maybe not be judged harshly. They're going along to get along. Yet their real self and beliefs and how they'd like to live may not match that facade, which is a cool French origin word that means the face, like the front of the face, the part you show people. So here we are learning more of Calvin's backstory. You guys might be interested to know. Madeline L'Engle wrote more books in this setting, in this world with these characters. And we actually get to know Calvin's mother as a character, not just the stories about her. We get to know some of her personality. Fascinating stuff. Yeah, I thought you'd like that. Okay. Remember how for poor Meg, everything was terrible, because when she feels something, she feels it big, right? Everything was terrible. She's got a clean house with room for her whole family that keeps them dry and warm. She's got a mother who loves her and thinks and feeds people and is generous and hospitable and is really cool. What else? What else does she have? You don't know how lucky you are to be loved. Ooh, it seems like Meg often thinks she's the only, that's it, I love that. She's the only one who's different and doesn't have it all together. It's brave of Calvin to be vulnerable in front of Meg. It's helping Meg for the first time realize she's got a good family. She has some real positives in her life. People like Calvin just might not have those things. It starts breaking down Meg's self-pity, which is part of the everything is wrong. It starts to break that down and build trust because they're knowing each other personally instead of by reputation. And when everyone takes off that mask and shows who they really are, there's the ability to build trust. I don't trust all the strangers I see walking down the street. I'm sort of neutral and I kind of wave. But when I see you, from the words you type, from the things you send in, from the books you love, now we can build mutuality and trust if that's our choice. It's one of the reasons that we included making an agreement in our activity packets, because I think it's so important that we're all sharing this beautiful life and this beautiful book in that way. Sharon adds, knowing other people, like Meg is starting to know Calvin, is allowing her to gain perspective. Maybe it feels like everything is wrong if your world is just yourself, right? If something's wrong with you, then everything's wrong if you are the whole world. But if your world has more people who are more rich and it's this interplay of folks, you might be having a bad day, but it's in a context and that can help you feel stable. Know what your heart is feeling, but know that it might not actually be the end of the world. Seems like Calvin's family doesn't love him a lot, but then again, Jubilee, that's it. That is Calvin's perspective. We're learning the story about his family, and he is like one of 11 kids. So there are 11, two parents, 12, 13. Maybe there's a grandparent around. There might be 15 people in the Calvin O'Keefe's family story. How many perspectives? Whoa, 15 people. I haven't time. Interesting observation. This is the first friend of Meg's that we meet. Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't get a sense when I was reading, and if I missed it, please correct me. I didn't get a sense that she knows any other people personally who aren't her relatives. All right. Oh, my goodness. It's 2:18. Oh, Sharon, one moment, please. I don't have a clock in this office. I usually use my phone, but I turned my phone off so that it wouldn't make noises while we broadcast. So will you give me about the roughly 10-minute warning so that I don't go on until like 6 o'clock at night and people are falling over from starvation? Thank you so much. Okay. Calvin looked somber. Then his enormous smile lit up his face again. Things are going to happen, Meg. Good things. I feel it. That's how Calvin knows stuff. He is feeling it in a way that is different than scientific knowing. How does he know these things that he feels? Jennifer, I think it was Jenny M, said something yesterday about emotional intelligence. Jenny or anyone else, is that what Calvin has? Is that what it means to be able to feel how something's going to go or to feel how another person might respond? How is his way of knowing things related to Charles Wallace's way? I misspelled is Calvin's way of knowing science. Just pretend I can spell there. Let's talk a little bit about comparing Calvin knowing stuff to Charles Wallace knowing stuff. compared to Mrs. Murray's knowing stuff. I'm going to call her Dr. Murray. There we go. Dr. Murray's way of knowing stuff compared to Meg's way of knowing stuff. Isn't this complicated? Because remember, Charles Wallace likes to look things up in the dictionary. He wants to learn to read, but I think he'd better save that. He likes sort of schoolish knowing, and he likes kind of science knowing, but he also knows what Mother and Meg are feeling. He knows things that are richer and deeper than any 5-year-old should. And Mother's saying, yeah, we think he's new, he's different. Maybe that slide is still coming up. Anyway, that's what I'm thinking about when Calvin says stuff like this. Things are going to happen, Meg. Good things. I feel it. Ooh, can we discuss the homework scene? What did you observe? What did you infer from those observations? And was there anything you loved or disliked or disliked or even feel uncomfortable about? Oh, Jenny says, I think Calvin does really tune into others, and he's very observant about that. Charles Wallace shares that quality. Calvin and Charles both observe, look for information, and ask questions, rather than making assumptions. They know that they can't take people at face value. The people are deeper than that. And that both of them have like the ability to look at nonverbal communication, like if someone's shoulders are pulled in or if their chin is up and they're smiling. That's a really obvious example of being able to read people. But there are many, many subtle cues that are like that. Very nice, Natalie. Charles Wallace looks things up, and he also observes stuff for himself. There's knowledge that others have written down, and there's going out and looking at it in the world, and that seeing, the observing, seems to be his strength. Thank you, Natalie and the library group. All right, homework scene. I kind of loved it. You know what? My whole life, I have known E equals MC squared because of this scene in this book, not because of any physics teacher ever. The energy emitted is equal to the mass of the particle times the square of the speed of light. Then I have to go look up what's the speed of light, fine, whether I'm using metric or imperial or whatever that is. And then I have to square it, and that's a lot of zeros. But mass is tiny. I've just always been able to remember that E equals MC squared. How about where Calvin is quizzing her on, so who wrote Boswell's Life of Johnson? Hint, Boswell wrote Boswell's Life of Johnson. I'm just saying, if it's a book you're not familiar with, you might. Oh, ready? Here's the other question. Who's it about? It's about Johnson. Okay. Oh. And the homework scene reminded some folks at Natalie's library that school is starting soon. Some of us are happy. Some of us are less enthusiastic. And maybe it'll be great. Maybe it won't be so great. We'll move through it. Time keeps going forward. Unless you're folding it. We'll get there. With a sudden enthusiastic gesture, Calvin flung his arms out wide, as though he were embracing Meg and her mother, the whole house. How did all this happen? Isn't it wonderful? I feel as though I were just being born. I'm not alone anymore. Do you realize what that means to me? But you're good at basketball and things, Meg protested. You're good in school. Everybody likes you. For all the most unimportant reasons, Calvin said. There hasn't been anybody in the world I could talk to. Sure, I could function on the same level as everybody else. I can hold myself down, but it isn't for me. Meg took a batch of forks from the drawer and turned them over and over, looking at the forks. I'm all confused again. Oh, so am I, Calvin said gaily. But now at least I know we're going somewhere. I'm starting to really, really like Calvin. Did you notice he did a real Charles Wallace thing in there? I can function on the same level as everybody else. I can hold myself down. Like Charles Wallace is all, I want to learn to read, but I'd better hold myself back so that I can function with the other people and they won't hate me as much. If they can feel superior. It's a little bit different flavor to it, but they're both holding themselves back. When you are journaling, in your private, you don't ever have to share this with anyone, but I want you to think about, do I ever hold myself back sometimes? Just because it's easier. As someone said, sometimes you just get along to go along. You know, if the job is to get the peanut butter and jelly sandwich made, you don't need to stop and have a whole treatise on bread. Sometimes you do. I don't know about your sandwich preferences. Now I know we're going somewhere. Jubilee says we should be expecting something to happen because he's foreshadowing. I think you are absolutely right. I think that Calvin sees patterns, that he feels this nonverbal information, he puts it into a pattern, and he knows he is foreshadowing. We're going somewhere. We're lining up. We've got our ideas. Meg's all, I want like lists and facts and stuff. I'm all confused again. But Calvin feels that wonderful thing. I'm not alone anymore. Calvin is conforming. Natalie is pointing out that that's an example of conforming. When Calvin pulls himself back, and you do that sometimes because you don't want to be judged, you don't want to stand out. Sometimes you're maybe even a little afraid. Okay. Yes, that is conforming, and sometimes there are positive reasons to do that. Sometimes there are negative reasons to do that. But he's not alone. He felt alone because he had to pull himself back and put up this facade of just being an average guy. In this family, no one has to pretend to be average because then you'll be so far behind, the mom with 2 PhDs. Yeah, pretty happy stuff. Alrighty, what we got? Do you think things always have an explanation? Yes, I believe that they do. This is Mother speaking. But I think that with our human limitations, we're not always able to understand the explanations. But you see, Meg, just because we don't understand doesn't mean that the explanation doesn't exist. I like to understand things, Meg said. We all do, but it isn't always possible. Charles Wallace understands more than the rest of us, doesn't he? Yes. Why? I suppose it's because he's different, Meg. Different how? I'm not quite sure. You know yourself he's not like anybody else. Oh, no, and I wouldn't want him to be, Meg said defensively. Wanting doesn't have anything to do with it. Charles Wallace is what he is. Different, new. That's Dr. Murray saying, okay, you've got a way of knowing things, but sometimes we don't understand the explanations. Sometimes that way of knowing doesn't fit the reality, and that's okay. Meg points out, Charles Wallace understands more, doesn't he? He's different, he's new. New. I really like that. I might have to wait one or two more books to see exactly how that plays out. But okay. Outdoors. This is after supper. The grass was wet with dew. The moon was halfway up and dimmed the stars for a great arc. Calvin reached out and took Meg's hand with a gesture as simple and friendly as Charles Wallace's. Were you upsetting your mother? He asked gently. I don't think I was, but she's upset. What about Father? Calvin led Meg across the lawn. The shadows of the trees, excuse me, were long and twisted, and there was a heavy, sweet, autumnal smell to the air. Meg stumbled as the land sloped suddenly downhill, but Calvin's strong hand steadied her. They walked carefully across the twins' vegetable garden, picking their way through rows of cabbages, beets, broccoli, pumpkins. Looming on their left were tall stalks of corn. Ahead of them was a small apple orchard bounded by a stone wall, and beyond this, the woods through which they had walked that afternoon. Excuse my yawns. Couple of reasons I picked this section out. First, the vegetable garden. I love knowing all the things that are growing there, including broccoli. Let's see. I live where cabbages, beets, broccoli, and pumpkins and corn and apple trees do really well. Do any of you live in a place where completely different things would grow in your garden? Maybe you live somewhere really much warmer and you grow different stuff. I would love to hear about that. The other thing, I wanted the hand. He just reached out and took Meg's hand. It was a simple gesture. It was a friendly gesture. There was nothing weird about it. Yay. And because they have started to trust each other, to know each other deeply, he can ask, "Were you upsetting your mother?" And he has a really gentle way of doing it. Fantastic. All right, garden. Push my button. Then there's the slightly romantic scene with the glasses come off and she's crying and the hand on the shoulder and he says she has dreamboat eyes. Don't worry. This is not a romance book, I promise. That's like the only moment. And it's more about them building trust and communication and knowing each other deeply. And when you're 14, 15, 16, when you start to bond like that, there might be an edge of romance in the back of your thoughts. Don't worry, it's okay. That is over for the book. Okay, hold it, you two. I love that Charles Wallace had that timing. They're just starting the little romantic scene, and Charles Wallace cuts it off. No, that does not belong in this book. Okay, hold it, you two, came a voice out of the shadows. Charles Wallace stepped into the moonlight. I wasn't spying on you, he said quickly, and I hate to break things up. But this is it, kids. This is it. His voice quivered with excitement. This is what? Calvin asked. We're going. Going? Where? Meg reached out and instinctively grabbed for Calvin's hand. I don't know exactly, Charles Wallace said, but I think it's to find Father. He doesn't know exactly. He's got an impression, but I think it's this. I don't have verification yet, but here's what my instinct is telling me. Oh, Natalie's group lives in a place with a lot of fruit trees, apricot trees, and plum trees. And Ruthie has a strawberry patch that's already gone through their season. Oh, zucchini and tomatoes are pretty popular around there. Our tomatoes, big tomatoes, aren't for a few weeks left. And zucchini, oh my goodness, everyone grows them. They sort of come up spontaneously. You have to be careful that people don't fill your car with them because what do you do with all that zucchini? All right. Charles is really excited. This is it, kids. This is it. How do you feel when you hear Charles Wallace in your mind saying that? What do any emotions come up for you? Are you also excited? Are you confused? Are you frightened? Are you, I don't know. I'm not you. Tell me how you are feeling. Are we excited because we know a lot about Father Murray? Oh, Jubilee says she feels excitement and there's a twinge of suspense. Like, oh, I'm not sure what's going to come, but now I'm up. I'm on this cliff. Did you think of any other threads while we were going through it? Or did you think about science, ways of knowing that aren't science, or conformity, or what's the fourth one? It's not included. I was thinking about ways of knowing. How does he know? And I noticed that he wasn't completely sure. There's an interesting word when a character in a book or a person you're near has a feeling, like a very intense feeling, like oh, they're so excited. And you start to feel that way through, even though that's their feeling for their reasons. When you kind of catch it a little bit, it's called compersion. You're walking with the other person a little bit through their story. I love that word. Okay. Suddenly, two eyes seemed to spring at them out of the darkness. It was the moonlight striking on Mrs. Who's glasses. Have you heard of the Cheshire Cat? Just send in a note if you have. The Cheshire Cat is a character from a completely different story that it can disappear, but its smile stays. Oh, Bella has heirloom tomatoes and zucchini and summer squash and snap peas and green beans. You guys must have the best stir fry night ever. Jubilee, Jenny agrees with you exactly on what you were thinking. Some people are feeling happy, some are feeling sleepy and on the verge of things, which some people, this is at the library group in Utah, they're feeling excited or they're feeling scared or they're feeling a combination of excited and scared. Yeah, I totally get that. Just because you're a paltry few billion years old, Mrs. Whatsit was starting indignantly when a sharp, strange voice cut in. All right, girls, this is no time for bickering. It's Mrs. Which, Charles Wallace said. There was a faint gust of wind, the leaves shivered in it, the patterns of moonlight shifted, and in a circle of silver, something shimmered, quivered, and the voice said, I do not think I will materialize completely. I find it very tiring, and we have much to do. I gave you three choices of how that might sound in the poll at the beginning of today's broadcast. Are there other ways that you have thought of Mrs. Which's voice sounding? Tell me. Interesting, isn't it, that we're using our eyes to decode something that is probably a sound, which means those repeated letters and stuff are open to interpretation. Huh. The first time I realized this, I was blown away. Every other reader in the world is going to get a different experience from the book, from any book, than I am. Everyone's got their own filter. Kenzie thought it would be a more slow, kind of drawn out, slow, deliberate sounds. A slow and deliberate voice, like a large blue whale. Fascinating. Oh, Natalie's group observed that Mrs. Who has glasses, like they shined into existence first, and Meg also has glasses. Oh, yeah. Keep your eyes on the glasses. They turn out to be little plot points, plot hooks, things that make plot change, or on which changes in the plot can be hung or described. Sharon agrees with Kinsey. A long, slow Whale boys. Spectacular. Alrighty. There is a third great question of science. What do you observe? What do you infer? But finally, what do you wonder? I read an amazing article written by Madeline L'Engle. It wasn't a story. She was writing an article about why would someone combine a fantasy story with science? What is science fiction? What is science fantasy? Why did you do that, Madeline L'Engle? And she wrote this great article. And she said, don't you understand that science can't exist without imagination and wonder and fantasy? Because the people who are really doing the science, they bring all these things in, they make inference, they make hypotheses, they then wonder, what would happen if oh my goodness, toddlers do this all the time. What would happen if I poured salt on the dog? That's a way of wondering. Please do not go pour salt on your dog. But you guys are older, so I trust you. But toddlers do that. That's science. What happens if I do this? Oh, mama says no. What happens if I do it now? Because it's a totally different time than it was. Mama still says no. Huh, all right. That's kind of fun. Jenny is saying, oh, I love this about Mrs. Witch's voice. Jenny, it might sound like more than one person with layered voices with just a little echo. So if you got maybe someone with a deep voice and someone with kind of a lilty voice talking at the same time, the sounds don't perfectly match up, which is why you've got a little echo thing going on. I love that. And Jenny loves that it's open to the individual's interpretation. I wonder if that was what Madeline L'Engle was thinking when she wrote it that way. I wonder which sound she was thinking of when she wrote it. I wonder if in different atmospheres, Mrs. Witch sounds different because they go planet to planet. I wonder if in her normal form, because we know they're kind of pretending to be shaped like little old ladies, her speech comes more easily to her. Did anyone notice Mrs. Who has trouble putting words together, so she uses quotations? Mrs. Which has trouble articulating words. I'm going to go backward a couple of slides. Just one slide. Mrs. Whatsit, who's never had any trouble with speaking that I've noticed, says, just because you're a paltry few billion years, the inference from the context is just because you're a few million years younger than I am. I'm older. She's speaking to Mrs. Who's older. Mrs. Whatsit is the youngest of the group, and she doesn't have trouble with speaking. So maybe over time, this speaking out loud to mortals things becomes harder and harder because that's not how beings who are billions of years old communicate. I wonder how Mrs. Who and Mrs. Which communicate in their regular day-to-day life when they're on vacation. I wonder if they go on vacation. Izzy's sister wonders if Izzy can eat the dog food. I wonder that too. Okay, what do you wonder? I see that I've gone really quickly through my slides today. I'm sorry. So can I show you the character braid? Hold on, it's across the room. Oof, here we go. Well, thanks to Valkyrie, who made these beautiful signs. I think it looks a lot better now, but you tell me. Okay. And I got caught up with yesterday's reading because first Charles Wallace and Meg came down to Charles Wallace, and then Mother came in, and they connected with each other. And then Mrs. Watson came in. There's chapter 1. Can you guys see this? Is this about right? Thank you, Sharon. Then they talk to each other. Mrs. Watson leaves. And the next day, the kids, that's yellow and maroon here, meet Calvin. And Calvin interacts with Meg. They all interact with Mrs. Who. And Calvin, no, Charles Wallace, yellow is Charles Wallace. Charles Wallace in particular interacts with Mrs. Who. And Mrs. Who is all, oh, little Megsy, isn't that nice? And kind of brushes her off slightly. And oh, Calvin, he's not quite what I thought, but he'll do. She's really talking to Charles Wallace. Interesting. So, what do you think of this experimental improvement to our experiment? I changed the materials and equipment. Does it make it easier to see what's going on than the ribbons I had on the first day? Apparently, I've been talking too fast today. I'm sorry. I also notice that Sandy and Dennis in the chapter we just read, they kind of come in, they talk, and they bounce back out of the story. We're not going to see Sandy and Dennis until the very end. So I think even though Val made us a sign for them, I think I'm going to relegate them for this book to being minor characters. I'm not going to give them a thread. Is this easier to read? Yeah, I think it's easier to read, and some of you guys do as well. Good. All right, I will catch up. And no, I'm not going to suddenly drive to Arizona, hand this to Sharon so she can catch up with tomorrow. She will leave the character braid out tomorrow. Don't worry. All righty. Well, I'm so excited that we have a little extra time. Let's go forward because we can, because it's closer than going backward in slides, to look at our threads. And I want everyone who's here who is comfortable typing a comment or question to pull something out about our threads. We've got science, observing, inferring, and wondering. We've got the happy medium. Did anything happy medium-ish happen in chapter 3? Got the idea of conformity, the idea of knowing stuff without learning it. And I think a better way to say that might be without the scientific way of learning it. I want everyone to think on those things. Pick one, pick a scene that you liked, and tell me what you're thinking about in these threads. Meanwhile, I will show you the cool things on my desk. This little guy is much smaller than Fortinbras, but he's a little Arctic fox, and he helps me be brave. Maybe there are things that help you be brave. He's got a little clip on him so I can put him on my desk. No, so oh, I'll put him back. Don't have any comments left coming in about what you wonder. Pop it in. Wonder something at me. Izzy, you are very good at wondering. Let's think about Meg's emotions in the last chapter we went through, that sense of being in or out of a happy medium. Okay. There we go. Evening was falling. They walked in silence. Calvin's, there's an arm thing again, touching. Oh, Kenzie, well said. Observing other people is a way of knowing. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of learning about them, looking at their behavior, listening to what they say. Interesting, watching the consequences of their actions. Do you think you can infer someone's values by observing the things they do and say? I want an answer from a lot of people on that, because that's very important to me. Oh, Jubilee says Calvin was a happy medium. That is how he felt in chapter 3, because he was just, I'm glad we've met now, Meg. We're going to be friends. He's happy. He's stable. He's right in the middle. I love that, Jubilee. Oh, when Calvin and Meg are doing homework, Calvin asks Meg some questions. And what he's doing is scientific. He's making different observations, changing what's going on. He's using a lot of questions to get an idea of how Meg's mind works. I notice he does this quite a bit, asking difficult questions in order to know more about Meg in particular. Fascinating. Oh, Haber says you just know how to act without really learning how. You know, I agree with that, because there's stuff that you like memorize or you read in a book or whatever. But some things, especially for very young people, you know, like in behavior, like how to be kind, or um, what your family values by what they do, just by watching, just by going through it. Do your parents ever take you with them when they go to vote? That's how I learned that voting and having your voice in how things are run is important to my family. Mom just carried me along to the voting booth. Believe it or not, I used to be like pint-sized sparrow. It was pretty fun. Meg doesn't necessarily like when Calvin's asking those questions until she has a better understanding of why he's asking, and that he will accept her however she is. To her, it feels a little bit like, oh no, this is a school quiz. I don't know this, Calvin. Come on. But then she realizes he's not looking for her weaknesses. He's looking for the what and how and wonder of Meg as an individual. I wonder, Izzy asks a really good question. I wonder if Mrs. Murray likes Calvin. Well, she was certainly polite to him, wasn't she? Oh, sure, come on for dinner. No problem. And I think that she's very good at being a friendly and polite person, even if she might be um, partly strangers. I wonder if she likes Calvin. Izzy, keep track of that. And when we see Mrs. Dr. Murray next, oh, that's not going to be for several chapters, because we just are leaving with the three ladies. Huh. Okay, Izzy, you keep working on in your head, what are the likable things about Calvin? And do you like him? I think that's just as valid a question. I wonder if where they're going is important. Where they're going, they could just be going anywhere and then the story happens. Or is the location important? Izzy, good question. And Jenny, it is right on that Calvin is not looking for Meg's weaknesses. He's looking for her complexity behind that facade. I love it. Oh, Natalie says, we wondered how Dr. Murray knew. You're right. I completely missed it. How did she know to make at least twice as much food as her family probably would have needed it? I just assumed, because this is just my understanding of the world, that she made double so she'd have leftovers. That's not necessarily the case. She might do a fresh meal every day. Or maybe they rotate the duty of cooking at their house. All right. Thank you for that note, Sharon. Did she know there was going to be a need for more food, the way that Calvin just knew he should go to the haunted house? Dr. Murray did deny being like Charles Wallace. She denied being special, but anyone who's the mother of Charles Wallace is gonna be pretty special. And maybe she just likes to make double recipes. I love that we could interpret that differently. Cool. You know what? When my kids were about that age, I had to make double all the time because they were running cross country, and they are both much taller than I am. My older child is over 6 feet, and my younger child is almost 6 feet. And so I had to feed them a lot every day. I guess that's why I assumed that's what was going on. Alrighty. Let's see. Meg is smiling wryly in this quotation, and her perspective is being opened. Remember, Calvin in this quote is opening her eyes to all the things she has to be grateful for and happy about. Sometimes I go through the day forgetting to say, wow, thank you. Wonderful universe that I've got a job that I love. I've got a house that's cozy and secure. My kids are fine. The rest of my family's fine. Maybe I should get better at saying, thank you. I am grateful every day. That sounds like a good practice. Jenny wonders how Mrs. Who, Mrs. Which, and Mrs. Whatsit knew that Meg, Charles Wallace, and Calvin would be able to develop the ability to cope with the adventure that's about to follow. It's a dangerous adventure. It's complex, these situations that they're being sent into. They've got almost no preparation. They've got no information to take in like book learning, just kind of some short explanations. How did those ladies know that those 3 kids were the right ones? I think that they never thought about it. How did they find Charles Wallace? Charles Wallace is new. Charles Wallace is special. And I had the feeling that they sort of honed in, where is that new special being that's been born on Earth? Let's find Charles Wallace. Interesting. Sharon in Arizona points out a really cool thing. Notice that the twins, Sandy and Dennis, we don't see much of them, but what we do know, they get along fine. They get B's with the occasional A, they do sports, people like them, they have friends, they're not afraid to beat people up if they're insulting Charles Wallace. They have the ability to conform to their role in society as 10-year-old kids. Is that because that's who they are? Are they being just totally genuine, getting through life? Or are they special in their own way, like the rest of the family is, and living behind a facade? I'm going to have to read every single another Madeline L'Engle book there is. I'm zipping through the slides, don't worry. Boop, boop, boop. So I get to the end. Glasses, wondering, character break. Check out. How did we do? And I want to know if you feel like I've skipped your comment or your question. That is not my intention, so please tell me if I'm going too fast or if I skipped something that was important to you, because I want to be in agreement with you that we're learning together and that we are stronger together. Ooh, that might be an image that comes up in this book. I want to be stronger together because we love these books together, and this is such a fun thing we're doing. All right. Tomorrow is chapter 4, The Black Thing. Sharon's going to be your discussionista. I will be reading along and thinking with you and sort of waving from I'm going to actually be on the University of New Hampshire campus learning how to be a better teacher. Isn't that fun? All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for me to push the buttons Thank you so much for joining me. This was great. And I'm having trouble pushing the buttons. Fascinating. I will do that. There we go. See you later.